Now then, you're very welcome along to this evening's football show. Later on, we'll talk to Luke Edwards about Project Big Picture over in the Premier League, but we are going to start with the Republic of Ireland. They play Finland on Wednesday, so our Nations League journey continues. The grim consequences of Thursday night in Slovakia probably sinking in more than ever. Ireland will not play in a major tournament until December 2022 at the earliest, so it is going to be a long old wait. We have Phillip Quinn with us of the Irish Daily Mail and the Mail on Sunday. Evening, Phillip.
Evening, Joe.
We'll worry about 2022 later on. A lot has happened in just the last 4 days.
Well, yes, indeed. It's been an extraordinary international sort of, over a week, really, because the squad came in, if you like, last Sunday week. So that's been sort of 8 days. They've been to Slovakia. They've come back, heading off again tomorrow morning at dawn for the third leg of this international window. First time we've had a triple header in a long while. And it has been very eventful. We haven't got the results we'd have liked on the pitch, and we've had some results positive-wise in terms of COVID that we didn't want off the pitch. So it's been very eventful so far, yeah.
The immediate news today, if people haven't seen it, I suspect they have at this stage, Aaron Connolly and Adam Ida have returned to the squad and also called up then Ryan Manning, Ronan Curtis, Jason Knight and Dara O'Shea. I know Stephen Kenny talked recently about not liking big squads. He wants everybody who's in the squad to be involved in the training. I suspect during COVID times at least, he may have to bolster that squad.
Yeah, I haven't done exact head count there, Joe, but I think you're probably between what we had yesterday at the Aviva and the players that have come in. He's probably around 11v11 with a spare goalkeeper, which is what he wants for their training when they get to Finland tomorrow. Some of those players that have come in, I don't think they'll be in his thoughts straight away for playing. I think he's okay in terms of bodies. But he's had to cope with an awful lot, Stephen Kenny, and you have to feel a certain amount of sympathy for him, Really, Connolly has come back in, again, was only confirmed this morning. He was the player that was missed above everybody else in Slovakia. And I think if we could rewind the clock a little bit, and Kenny was asked, if he could get one break in this international window, the break would have been that Connolly wasn't ruled out of Slovakia. For what we now know was erroneously a false positive test involving the FAI official. And, I think questions have to be asked here of UEFA. I know it was touched upon in your programme yesterday. I know the FAI are really annoyed. They're not going to get a rematch, but the loss of Connolly for something that was not the FAI's fault really hit Irish football hard last Thursday, because you look back at all the chances that we had in that game, and I think 3 of them fell to Alan Brown and 1 fell to Conor Hurahan. Had one of those chances fallen to Aaron Connolly, our most dangerous striker, our most potent forward, you'd have suspected he would have put one of them away. And then the whole world would be different in terms of where Irish football is right now. We'll be looking forward to going to Windsor Park next month. So Connolly has come back. I think the FAI, I think Kenny was entitled to bring him back because he's in the clear. He comes back for a game that, it's important. The game is important, Joe, tomorrow. Let's not get away from that. We need a win. I think Kenny needs a win. Our World Cup seeding has fluctuated a little bit in this window. We're now down to 3. We were 2 before the game yesterday. We're now down to the third pot. The Finns, if they beat us, they come into the third pot. So they have a lot of incentives there. So Kenny needs to get a win, and having Connolly back is a big help, because he will provide a much needed impetus. And we saw it again there yesterday against Wales. We were a bit tighter in general play yesterday. I thought the defence was protected a bit better than it had been. But we still need someone to put the ball in the back of the net. And, Roy Keane came out today and made that observation. And I think Kenny knows that we need someone who can score goals. We have no Robbie Keane, but certainly Connolly is probably the closest to what we have. And he was sorely missed in Slovakia. And I think when the dust settles down from this international window, Joe, I think there could be a couple of nations making a phone call to UEFA and just asking to go through the procedures that they had for the COVID testing. And let's see, can something come out of it? But we're not going to get a replay. I'm afraid you're right. That ship has sailed. And our best bet now is the World Cup 22. And that draw is coming up pretty quickly. Lot to talk about. But yeah, Wednesday, tomorrow, Finland, the next test.
And Phillip, in what respect do you think it's UEFA's fault?
Well, the tests that were done in Bratislava were UEFA regulated. That's my understanding of it. And if you look at the FAI email last night, they mentioned UEFA test in Bratislava. They mentioned it, I think, twice in their email. So UEFA had some role either in setting up the test, in appointing the testers, in appointing the laboratory, and whatever showed up in that test, which knocked 2 key players out of the most important match that Ireland have played this year was incorrect. So someone has to be responsible. And I think the first person that the FAI want to talk to about this is, you appointed the testers, you appointed the laboratory through the Slovaks, through Bratislava, but UEFA, you appointed it, you were happy with that. Look at the results, we're not happy with these results. So there's an issue that has to be resolved. As I said to you, it doesn't change the outcome, unfortunately. It was very cruel that our best player, our most attacking player, missed that crucial game.
UEFA's response will be this happens in about 1 in 500 tests, unfortunately, and they're the odds, and that's the reality. There's nothing anyone can do.
Yeah, that's probably what they will say to us, yeah. And if we go looking for a few bob, which I think may come to pass, because I know at least one other association that also got a false positive. I don't want to say who it is, yes, but I think if the FAI and 3 or 4 other associations knock on the door, who knows? There may be something coming their way, but it's not likely. But it's a long shot. But yeah, UEFA will say that. Look, deal done, lads. Just get on with it. But we didn't get a break there, Joe. And
no.
And Kenny actually has needed a break in this whole bubble. I mean, the one he got then at the weekend when he came back, and we heard about the other player that couldn't play yesterday. Hasn't been mentioned. I'm not going to mention him, but the name has been out there a little bit. But the 4 players in close contact with him, we gather those 4 players would have played yesterday. Would they have made a difference? Almost certainly.
Oh yeah, almost certainly, for sure. That John Egan, Callum O'Dowd, Conor Harran and Callum Robinson, as you said, Stephen Kenny said they all would have played. To what extent is it self-inflicted on that flight out? Connolly and Ida headed for the back of the plane. Nobody told them to sit with the other players.
Yeah, I heard your discussion with Gary Owens yesterday, and I know he mentioned the word red herring. What I would say to that is, the players are told where to sit, and these are the 2 youngest lads. They got on the plane. When I gathered, they didn't actually sit in their seats originally. They went straight down to the back of the plane, with a bit more room. A 19-year-old, 20-year-old, whatever it is. So they're ultimately responsible to the manager, to Stephen Kenny. And Kenny said, I didn't see them, they're at the back of the plane. Look, wherever they sat, the FAI official could have been in a different seat. As it turned out, he wasn't unwell. It was just a bizarre set of circumstances that they went to sit in the one seat near a person who was given a false test result in Bratislava the following day. But what I will say on that, Joe, is that if you can imagine that this airline, and I know Gary Owens said they couldn't hire 4 airlines to get the whole 53 on it to make sure there was over 2 meters between everybody else. So there's a cost factor. But if you have all the players clustered together in their seats, in their right seats, and one of them gets it, well, it could be more than 4 that are close contacts, it could be 6, could be 8. So when I'm told that for tomorrow's flight to Finland, the players will be dispersed and they'll be sitting beside, say, a member of Kenny's backroom staff, someone equipment or physio, the operations team, the FAI have the CEO and the president is there. So the players will be dotted around. They won't be sitting together. And that is something that the FAI, that Gary Owens did learn about that trip to Bratislava. The notion that, 24 players would all sit row after row after row was something that they've reviewed, and they're going to change it for tomorrow.
Yeah, that's interesting. And it makes sense because, OK, you can argue there was a mistake of sorts made on the flight out, but it only resulted in 2 players being out of the game, whereas there was no mistake made on the flight home. Everybody was in the correct seat, and yet 1 positive player took out another 4. And Owens did make that suggestion yesterday, so that's interesting to hear they're going to go with that for the Finland flight. Just for people who didn't catch the interview yesterday, I think he makes the point about the 4 planes here, Phillip, but I put it to him. Dan McDonnell had reported that squad members had queried whether plans should have involved a bigger plane or alternative arrangements, and this was Gary Owens' response.
Well, we're looking. I mean, the reality is that there was 53 on the plane. If we followed those guidelines, we would have needed 4 planes. We would have only been able to fit 16 on the plane. And I think, Joe, that needs to form part of a review. We will look at that. But we're using the same plane that international teams are using. In fact, Wales are actually going home on the same plane that we travelled on.
Sure.
So I think it would be a huge financial burden for international teams if you have to comply with the 2-meter rule on the plane. And I'm not sure that's financially sustainable. And I think that needs to be fed in as well as part of the review with UEFA and HSE.
Ultimately, I came away yesterday, Phillip, just realising how difficult this whole situation is. I mean, they just can't have 4 planes. It's not possible.
No, I think the Italians under 21s had 2 planes in Reykjavik on Friday. They landed there with COVID in their ranks. And just on that, we're playing them tomorrow in a huge match. And of their 20 man squad that was selected for these two matches, the Italians. There's only 4 available now. Only 4, including, and their coaches now is not available either. So this COVID is, and it touches upon something you mentioned yesterday, and also Stephen Kenny mentioned it as well. You know, maybe November there might even be a review of all the international matches, but I'm told UEFA are going to get these games played. That they're not pulling back. If you can field a team, the Italians are fielding an under 20 team tomorrow against Jim Crawford's 21s, which gives them a great chance of qualifying for the finals. So I think we're going to have the games in November. We're just going to have to just cope as best we can. There's a report out today, as you've probably seen, that there's unconfirmed reports that an Irish player has tested positive. There's a retest going on at the moment. We haven't heard the result of that. So this is another issue that Kenny has to deal with before going to the airport tomorrow morning. Is he going to lose a player? He's going to lose more than one player. That's probably one of the reasons he has brought in a few extra ones to cover. Every manager is going to be doing that. In terms of what the FAI can do, they did things by the book coming back, and the player who tested positive was sitting around 4 players. I'm also told that actually there could have been an extra 2 or 3 players around him, but those seats were empty. So there could have been more players ruled out of today's game. Look, this is such a difficult issue and a difficult disease to keep out of our lives, you know, and I think it's going to happen again next month. There's going to be more issues. And I think the FAI are learning as they go along. They did learn, don't put all the players sitting together. So they're going to change that. But I also think they looked at a possibility of getting a bigger plane and ripping up seats and moving things around so you could create bigger gaps. But there was a huge cost factor involved in that. So from what I gather is they're using the same firm that they flew to Bratislava and back with, Pullman-style seats. There isn't 2 meters between each seat, but they're going to make sure that the players are not sitting beside each other and there'll be gaps. And hopefully what's happened today and what happened before the game yesterday won't arise before kick-off on Wednesday.
Yeah, because I know when it first emerged that Ida and Connie had sat in the wrong seats and they had designated seats, my interpretation of that initially was, oh geez, well if they'd been sitting in their correct seats they would have been 2 meters away from everybody. But Gary Owen said yesterday that's not the case. There's nobody sitting 2 meters away from anybody. Might just bring people through some of what Stephen Kenny was saying afterwards. I think you're involved in one of the questions here. I'm not sure which one, but we'll have a run through of just a couple of clips of Kenny. And then I do want to get your thoughts on the football as well over the last couple of days. So in response to Stephen Kenny initially talking about, you know, how essential or otherwise this non-footballing person who had the false positive was, Gary Owens insisted yesterday that the false positive member of staff was essential, that UEFA stipulated you have to have a communications person on the ground. This Gary Owens response was put to Stephen Kenny.
Stephen, Gary Owens was on radio today at News Talk, off the ball, and he addressed some of your comments yesterday about the non-essential member of staff who took unwell, although it seems to have turned out that actually it was a false positive test. Do you kind of feel maybe that description was a little bit unfair on the FAI official, because you did say that it's a very good team, very professional team, and Gary says everybody on that plane was there for a reason, they had to do a job.
Yeah. What do you want me to say, Phillip?
Well, you referred to the person who was tested positive, and then since that's a false positive, you referred to that person as being a non-essential.
Well, he wasn't taking the free
member of the travelling party.
He wasn't taking the free kicks. You know what I mean? You know, but everyone is important. I treat everyone equally, and I've always had that situation. Everyone is important. So I don't have a hierarchy of how I treat people, and certainly that's not the issue. The point I'm making was he wasn't a player. You know, he wasn't a player from that point of view. It was a late addition. But now Gary's right. Everyone is important. I've no issue with that. But it was a situation. You know, obviously I can't be breaching naming the person in question, because the person in question is a great guy. You know, and works very hard for the association. Really good person who I have a very good relationship with. But that I was just making the point that at the time he wasn't taking the free kicks.
He wasn't taking the free kicks, but he was essential, it sounds like. Steve, I mean, you just get the impression Stephen Kenny is just so frustrated with this whole situation. And maybe logically he's just thinking, just if you're not a player, I just don't want you on the bloody plane, even if that person is essential. Like, Gary Owens explained it pretty well, I thought, yesterday, why that person was needed.
Yeah, UEFA stipulate you have to have a media representative in your travelling party, so the FAI has to have somebody there.
Yeah.
I mean, the president was there, the CEO was there, you know, the operations staff was there, Kenny's backroom staff was there, the players were there. I think everybody on that plane, and Owen's made it quite clear, they were essential to the logistics of the trip. I think Stephen possibly could have said the other day, you know, when I spoke to him, my question to him yesterday, he could have said, yeah, I didn't quite mean it to come across like that, but yeah. Maybe there was a sense of frustration. I would suggest, Joe, that the comments probably didn't go down too well with some of the FAI staffers that have been working their, you know, socks off, operations-wise in the last week. You know, when the story broke about the positive test on Saturday, they worked through the night to try and get the squad that needed to be submitted together. There was a lot of people up right through the night because the squad had to be submitted by a certain time to UEFA, and there was people coming and going. So people are working 24/7 to keep the show on the road, and there are people that we don't see an awful lot of. We see Kenny, we see the players. We heard Gary Owens yesterday, but there's other people who are vital, and I think the person that Stephen referenced to there, who was I kind of suggested he was from the communication section, didn't mention by name, but he had a vital job to do, and I think Stephen would acknowledge that.
Yeah. By the way, just on this player, this Irish player, this fresh news now who has returned a positive test last night, as we understand it, we don't have anybody else deemed as a close contact. So at worst, it'll be one player missing from the Finland game. It doesn't look like it's going to be 3-4 players along with that positive.
No, that's my understanding of it. It's just one player. I haven't heard about the retest yet, but we're pretty close to sort of packing the bags for tomorrow morning. But it won't be anybody else affected.
Okay.
No.
Well, that's some good news in the midst of not much good news. Just to recap then, because I know people are busy over the weekend and they might have been following how all this unfolded. The Welsh game was obviously 2 o'clock yesterday. So here's Kenny being asked about how the situation developed across Saturday night, Sunday morning from his perspective.
Can you talk us through the last 24 hours, even since the press conference yesterday, as to how it all developed and how late in the day you knew the players weren't going to be available, that the 5 players were going to be available, and how difficult the last 24 hours has been for you and the management team?
Yeah, no doubt it has been difficult, but it all pales into insignificance for the players themselves, really. You know, I think it's, you know, obviously, to get news that you have it yourself, and then, for one of the players to get that, and then for the players to be close contact, which they all feel perfectly healthy. They all feel they could have played today, and the implications of that for them. So that can be difficult for them to deal with their teammates, not knowing, the impact of that. But I think so. It was all pretty. It was nearly midnight, nearly close to midnight when we probably found out last night, and so it was. Had to change a lot of stuff today, and it was an early match, 2 o'clock match, so we're leaving the hotel early enough, I think. It all had to be sorted out before breakfast, and thankfully the players' attitude is just brilliant. Really good group. They just they love playing for Ireland, and they showed their professionalism by performing to the level that they did.
He's probably right to cite their attitude, Phillip. Like, when you think about it, if your work environment or my work environment in here had outbreaks and people testing positive and others deemed close contacts, and then another fresh outbreak now, frankly, neither of us would want to be anywhere near the place. This is a really difficult situation for everybody. None of these players want to catch it. There's their own health, first of all, and you don't know how you're going to react to it, regardless of how healthy you are, be it chronic fatigue for months and months on end. Obviously, if you're a footballer, that's not good. And then I'm sure lots of these players have family situations, be it kids with respiratory illnesses or parents who are nearby or pregnant partners, any number of various scenarios. They really don't want to be bringing this home. It must be incredibly stressful for the players.
Yeah, I think Darrell Horgan said after the match yesterday, it's crazy. It's a crazy world right now for everybody. Yeah, the players have been terrific. I think you couldn't fault them. You know, they've entered this elite bubble, if you like. They've given up 12, 13 days, and they're doing the best for their country. Some of them have got, you know, these close contact tags now hanging over them, which I think could affect them going back to their clubs. The 4 players that were ruled out yesterday, I'm not sure how they're fixed now when they go back to their clubs.
Yeah.
Which is a difficulty because they can't earn their wages for a little while. But hopefully that's not the case. I'm not quite sure on how long they have to spend in quarantine. But yeah, it is very difficult. But it's difficult for everybody, Joe. So if you weren't trying to put a program on the air, if I wasn't trying to put something in the newspaper, or the fella, you know, Stephen Kenny wasn't doing his job as our manager, do we all just sit back and say no, nothing happens? Like, I think sport is vital, important if we can keep it going at all. We got to keep it going, and that's why I think the matches will go ahead next month. You could see skeleton squads. I think you're going to see more withdrawals. I think you're going to probably, Kenny could have to have a squad of 40 players for 3 games next month, 2 of them away from home again. But the games are going to go ahead. The UEFA are determined to get the playoffs finished because next year it's World Cup qualifiers from March onwards. So I think you're going to see the games being played, and there will be more of these sort of stories breaking, no doubt, in the middle of November. And we have to cope with it. No one has not been affected. Everybody knows somebody in their family or close friends or neighbours who's been affected, and it's not going to go away until we have a vaccine.
No, it's not. On the theme of next month and the internationals and what the clubs might have to say about all of this, here's a question from Nathan to Stephen Kenny.
It feels as though international football has been a bit of a lottery over the past week, Stephen, because there's been so many cases, and you having 7 cases, and I think it feels there's going to be a bit of a fallout from all this when the players go back to their clubs as well. Would you be confident that international football can and should continue next month as well with the 3 matches, that with cases rising, with so much of an element of chance as to who gets it, who doesn't get it at the moment, that you don't know what players you're going to have before every match, it feels, at the moment? Would they be better off almost putting the international calendar on hold until next year and they've a better grasp on the situation?
Yeah, well, obviously I'm in the middle of just the camp, and I think it is an interesting question. I think I'm sure everything will be reviewed, and I'd have to think about the answer to give you a direct answer. I think it's one that I'd have to consider, think about, and ideally you want life not to be interrupted. You want to be able to. Sport is very important. Football is the most participated sport in the country. The Irish national team is a very, very important part of Irish sport and life. And I think we don't want that to be diminished. We don't want it not to happen. But there are serious challenges. I'm sure there's a lot of anxiety. I'm sure with a lot of the clubs as well. And that will be, I'm sure that's something for everyone to consider.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see what the clubs have to say about all this. We've had our positives. Scotland have had a couple of positives. I saw yesterday Naby Keita and 4 of his Guinea teammates positive. All the clubs after this window might just say this crisscrossing around the globe. I mean, you've got South American players all flooding back into Europe now. I don't know what shape they're all in. It's hard to keep track of everything. But you could imagine the clubs getting together and saying, look, we can kind of keep the show on the road, domestic leagues, but releasing everybody around the world for a week and look what happens. I mean, and I'm sure we're no different, that on the flights to various places, a 2-metre distance just is not possible. I'm not sure the clubs are going to, I don't know what powers they have. So it's not as if they can suddenly say we're not releasing our players. But I'm sure they're going to be getting together and having some discussions, depending on the fallout from this week.
It could be very interesting to see, Joe, what the clubs do in relation to players' availability. They could say, Joe Bloggs is injured. He can't make it. You don't know what they may have to protect their own interests.
Well, Alex Ferguson would sit them all down and say you all have back strains, and that's the end of it.
Absolutely, yeah. And if you haven't got one, you'll have one in a minute when I've dealt with you. But you mentioned Liverpool there. That 7-2 result, and I think back on it, and Liverpool had 2 players ruled out with tests for that match, and Shaqiri since, and now you talk about Naby Keita. I'm just wondering, it could be within certain clubs already. I just don't think necessarily that travel keeps this at bay or brings it in any worse than it already is. It's very much prevalent across the water, and as it is here. So I think they'll try and keep the show on the road as best they can. A lot of money comes through international football, through the international associations that filters on down to the clubs as well. So I think the club will be reluctant to take a stance. But then, Project Restart is the Premier League are looking after themselves as usual. So we'll see what they do. But from what I gather, UEFA are insistent that the international calendar, the matches in November, will go ahead.
Okay. We're talking here with Phillip Quinn of the Irish Daily Mail and the Mail on Sunday. Phillip, I want to get your thoughts on the actual football then, these past two games that we've seen. Just to get the ball rolling then, David Myler, last clip, David Myler was on OTB AM this morning. So here's his general take on the performance yesterday.
We just need to find a way to put the ball in the back of the net, I think, is the story really from the last two games. I think the performances have both been, much better and a significant improvement on, say, the Bulgaria-Finland games. Like yesterday, I think, we control the ball a lot better. We moved around well. It's just when we're getting into the final third and we're getting chances, we've just got to start taking them. It's probably the one major downfall of this group is we just need to get goals. That's it. And the performance is good. They're knocking the ball around well. If you factor in everything that happened in the last few days with the, obviously playing 120 minutes, losing on penalties to Slovakia, obviously then the COVID hitting with the losing significant amount of players, that must have been, upset the preparation for Stephen. And then other lads stepping in to, play, doing well. And then it's just need those goals. That's it, really. I think, all the signs are really good. I think we're playing lovely football. We are really trying to control games now, and we're not turning over possession. Yes, you can. I think for anyone who watched the game yesterday, it's quite interesting that there's a lot of people who are fully behind Stephen Kenny, and there's others who are a bit, have their reservations, and you can almost judge those people by their opinions that, it was an awful performance or it was a good performance. And I think I'm certainly in the camp that I want Ireland to do well and I want Stephen to do well, and the performances have been better. We've knocked the ball around. We are certainly controlling the game. If you look at Aaron Ramsey's interview after the game, he even compliments, he said it was a tough game because, Ireland have, tried to change their style. They're keeping hold of possession. They made it really difficult for us. He was almost taking a swing at us to say, like, in the past we've been so negative, we sat deep, and then he said they've suddenly changed. So that shows that this group of players under this new manager are going in the right direction.
Yeah, Ireland had 55% possession yesterday. Phillip, what have you made of the two games?
Yeah, interested to hear David Myler there, because he was captain probably when we had the last great moment, if you like, in Irish football in Cardiff in 2017, 3 years ago, just around now. And I remember in that game, he took out Joe Allen. And Joe Allen had to go off, didn't know what day of the week it was. And he was Allen was calling the shots, and he was gone out of the game. And McLean got the late goal, and we played well that night. And really, since that moment, Joe, we really haven't arrested. I think we probably have arrested Sly a little bit. Certainly, O'Neill's last year was poor. McCarthy stabilised without bringing us where we needed to go. And Kenny, first two games certainly were poor. The last two games have been better. And let's hope that can just translate into a win tomorrow night, Wednesday night, because winning gives everybody a huge lift. It vindicates Kenny and his methods. The players believe more in their manager, and all the signals from the players so far have been very positive. They like the information they're getting, particularly the preparation. Andrews and Duff are involved in that, so the clips and videos they do, it's all very short, sharp analysis, but they know exactly what they have to do on the pitch. You're right, I think Myler is right, we are controlling the ball a lot more. We're not giving it away, but at the same time, we're trying to make something use of it. There's no point in having the ball in your own half and having 70% possession unless you actually do something with it. And we are getting there. It's a big game on Wednesday, Joe. It's a big game for lots of reasons, because it'll set the tone for November. As I said to you earlier, the Finns they've had 2 wins in this group. They're going to the European Championship finals. They're 1 win away from getting into the pot 3 for the World Cup qualifying draw in December. We're 1 win from getting back into pot 2. So they have every incentive. They're at home. They have every incentive to be on their best behaviour tomorrow and to make things difficult for us. And yet Kenny knows he needs a win as well. A win just lifts everything, lifts the mood for November, because 3 big games coming up there. I agree with David Myler. I think we all know goals is an issue. I think 10 goals in the last 17, 18 games now, competitive games. We need somebody to put the ball in the back of the net. Shane Long had his chance yesterday. Darrell Horgan had a couple of half chances. He came on as a sub. But we've got Connolly back. We've got Ida back. They will make a difference. I think they will have a point to prove. Big time after the Slovakia shambles where they missed out, both of them, through no fault of their own. So I think they've got a point to prove, and they're big assets tomorrow. And I think I'm just looking around what else he might do. I think the back five will probably be the same. The midfield three, probably McCarthy, Hendrick, Hurahan. I thought Malumbi did well yesterday. Just needs to add a bit of goal threat, but he great box-to-box guy, won a lot of tackles.
Sorry to interrupt. I think Hurahan's out now by dint of being in close contact of the positive yesterday.
Oh?
I think John Egan, Callum O'Dowda, Conor Hurahan and Callum Robinson, were they not the four?
No, it was Alan Brown.
It was Alan Brown.
Egan Brown and the two Callums.
Excuse me, you're right, okay.
So, Hurahan is okay.
Okay, if Conor Hurahan's family are listening, there's no worries there, okay.
No, he's fine, but just Hurahan, I think McCarthy will come back in as well. James McCarthy didn't play yesterday, and he's kept him in the squad, so he's okay. I think Kevin Long is okay as well. So I think there's a few options there for Kenny for tomorrow, and I don't think Finland are as good as Slovakia. So I think if we play as well as we did in Bratislava, and we have a little bit of nous and a little bit of sharpness in front of goal that Connolly will bring, then I think we can get a result. And then suddenly, you know what? It's not as grey. Then we're looking ahead to November. But I can't stress, Joe, how vital it is that we stay among the second seeds for the World Cup draw. Because if we're a third seed, I was looking at it. We're playing 3 matches in March, and if we're a third seed, I don't want the scenario, but some of the top 2 seeds, for example, you could have Spain and Switzerland 1 and 2.
Right.
You could have Russia and Germany and Russia 1 and 2. You could have Italy and Poland 1 and 2. We don't want to be in a group with those teams. We have to stay as a second seed.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because I mean it's easy to lose sight of the Nations League and its importance. I must say, on the whole, I am surprised at just how much Stephen Kenny and Damien Duff and Keith Andrews have got the team playing football. I thought it would be a much stickier process, but they seem to have done really well, and the team is creating chances. You could have absolutely imagined a situation whereby Shane Duffy and John Egan are passing the ball to each other for 10 minutes, but that's not happening. You think of the Brown chance, the Howard chance in particular, and brilliant work from McGoldrick, who isn't scoring but is doing many very good things. That they should have been 2 goals for a start. So, there are a lot of reasons to be optimistic. It's just whether over the next 18 months to 2 years, a Troy Parrott, Aaron Connolly, Adam Ida type can blossom into somebody who's going to score. I mean, I'm not even looking for Robbie Keane. Can score 30 goals across the next decade. That's kind of what we need here.
Yeah, I'd certainly take that, all right. I'd probably take a lot less than that. You mentioned McGoldrick, huge loss yesterday.
Yeah.
And a huge loss again. I thought he was outstanding in Bratislava. The way he dropped deep, the way he linked the play, the way when he turned and his balance on the ball. He's a lovely mover.
He's wonderful. What do you do with a striker who does absolutely everything beautifully except score goals? I mean, you'd still have to keep him in because he's so good, but it's part of our issue.
Remember what was the old, the Jimmy Greaves? You won't like him, boss. He only scores goals.
Yes, yeah.
And Robbie to that degree as well. Look, I think Kenny. I will say this. The under-21s did extraordinarily well under Stephen Kenny, and you think about it. And Connolly and Ida were part of that, and Troy Parrott, and the things he got that team to do, and the position they're in now, heading into tomorrow's match with a chance to qualify for the European finals for the first time ever. If he can just replicate that at the senior level, and it just takes a little switch, a little flick, hopefully it'll happen sooner rather than later. And we need to finish the end of the year in a high. Sorry, dropped my pen. But let's just hold fire. Look, it's been a difficult week for him. I mean, the extenuating circumstances with all the distractions and COVID and players in and players out, and even now we're still not sure who's available tomorrow.
Yeah.
But one result, it's amazing how that can just set it in train in motion a lot of good things to happen. And Kenny's only starting out in this journey yet, so I'm trying to be balanced and trying to say that look, he's done some things well, but we do need a couple of goals, we do need a result, because that'll lift the mood.
Okay, we'll leave it there. Phillip Quinn of the Irish Daily Mail and Mail on Sunday. Thanks, Phillip, much appreciated.
Thanks, Joe.
Now then, very happy to say we have Luke Edwards from The Telegraph with us. Good evening, hello.
Good evening.
What have you made, and you have been on the Irish beat for many a year, what have you made of the revolution that we're undertaking at the moment? You've been impressed with the early signs?
Yeah, I mean, I admire what's happening. I think it's the right way to go.
There's a but. There's a hell of a but coming here.
There is a big but, but 4 games, no wins, 1 goal. So, yeah, it's. Okay, I've had this discussion, shall we say, with a couple of my friends in the Irish press pack, and ultimately Kenny's going to have to win some games of football, and it doesn't matter if you talk about long-term projects. Long-term projects are always talked about. Managers are always backed until they're not backed. So he needs to start winning some games and he needs to start scoring some goals. And look, the problems are the same, aren't they? The problems are the same as they were under Martin O'Neill, under Mick McCarthy. Since Robbie Keane's gone, there hasn't been a goal scorer. But yeah, there've been encouraging signs, for sure. I think, as I say, it's the right way to go. And I've just said this all along, that I think the FAI actually have to come out publicly, not off the record, not assurances given anonymously, briefings. They need to come out on the record and say what the expectations are for Stephen Kenny in the World Cup qualifying campaign in particular, because and I know that if they get off to a bad start in that tournament and there's no chance of qualifying for it after 5 or 6 games or whatever, that might be a bit early, but, then fans will start to question the appointment and everything else. Pressure builds on the manager unnecessarily, and I just think they need to set out that, okay, are they going to be honest with the public and say qualifying for the World Cup is not the objective? It's about putting a team in place and standards in place and a process in place and a way the team plays ahead of the Euros, because the next Euros are 2024, which is a hell of a long time away. And that's going to be 3 years until Kenny really gets to be able to prove that his methods are going to be successful in terms of results. So right way to go, but he's going to need a lot of understanding and a lot of patience and a lot of support from the FAI. And from what I see at the moment, it's been fudged a little bit.
Project Big Picture is what we want you to fill us in on. Liverpool, Manchester United in particular are driving this, and it seems that Rick Parry, now chairman of the English Football League, is on board as well. The top lines: Premier League will go from 20 to 18 clubs. The Championship, League 1 and League 2 will all retain 24 teams. So from Premier League point of view, when it comes to relegation, the bottom 2 go down, and then the next place team will go into the Championship playoffs. League Cup, abolished. Community Shield, abolished. Parachute payments scrapped. But there will be 250 million quid made immediately available to the EFL, and then 25%, quarter of all future TV deals from the Premier League net will go to the English Football League. Now, I know there's a grab going on here of some kind. I mean, just self-interest dictates that they're not doing this out of the goodness of their heart. Different responses, like I saw David Conn, for instance, saying there are undoubtedly some self-serving elements to their prospectus, but by far the most significant is the proposal that the Premier League should share a net 25% of its future deals with the English Football League and give 250 million quid immediately. That is an offer, finally after a generation, to rejoin the top division with the 3 below and repair the vast, calamitous financial gap caused by the breakaway of the First Division back in 1992. So this certainly isn't all bad. I just can't work out what's going on here, because there's no self-interest rules.
Yeah, it's not all bad, but it's a rescue package that masks a pretty blatant power grab by the top 6. The most concerning thing for me, and I've written this in the Telegraph today, is that everything of those things, and David Conn is a journalist I admire, and certainly he knows more about finances of football than me. However, the most significant thing about this is not the money they are offering to give the EFL. The most significant thing of this entire proposal is the change of the one club, one vote democracy that has effectively kept the Premier League in check since its creation. To basically now what we're going to have is the big 6 clubs, along with 3 token clubs, Southampton, Everton and West Ham, will have the votes on deciding what happens. All future regulations, all future plans of the Premier League will be decided by that, effectively a cartel. Now,
and is that the big prize? Is that really what they're after?
I think so. I mean, I liken it to a dictator. A dictator, before he takes power, says, I want this absolute power, but I will not harm the people. I will not harm the country. I will not govern in self-interest. I am all for the good of the people and the good of the country. But we all know what happens next once they get grip of power. And I think what you will see from the Big Six is they will govern for themselves. There's been nothing, absolutely nothing in the track record of those 6 clubs that says they are ultimately interested in anything but themselves. And there's all sorts of little caveats and everything. So, they could negotiate their own TV deals like Barcelona and Real Madrid do. They could vote to cut the Premier League again by another 2 clubs in, say, 5 years' time to coincide with the creation of a European Super League, which they can then create room in their domestic calendar to go into, whilst not completely shredding their links with their domestic competitions. So for me, the changes to the voting system are the insidious threat really here. And you have to question again the opportunism of the package that's been, this project predates COVID-19. It started in 2017. Rick Parry, who is now the chairman of the EFL, was working on behalf of this for Liverpool and Manchester United 2 years before he became chairman of the EFL. So the timing of it stinks. And it just makes me very, very sceptical, and it makes me very, very worried. I think if you allow the Big 6 clubs in England to control the Premier League, they will govern it for themselves, and you will see all sorts of changes. Hypothetically speaking, let's stop Premier League clubs playing in the FA Cup. Let's renegotiate how much money we're going to give to the EFL in a few years' time. We'll vote that through, which is what, again, analogy, supermarkets do that to farmers and suppliers. They say, right, they get them reliant on the money that they provide, and then they renegotiate the deal on better terms for themselves on a less good deal for the farmers. So it's the same sort of model. It makes me very, very worried, very, very scared. And I just have to question why this rescue package has to be given with this caveat of changing the voting system. And I honestly don't think it needs to be resisted, because I do not trust those 6 clubs with the future for having the good of English football as a whole. I just do not trust them at all.
Okay, well, the Big 6 again: Liverpool, Man United, Man City, Arsenal, Chelsea and Spurs, and then there'd be a vote as well for the 3 clubs who've been in the division longest. That's currently Everton, Southampton and West Ham. For instance, Simon Jordan, who often pops up doing his TalkSport work on your Twitter feed, says this is a deal with the devil. It doesn't stack up, it doesn't work. It's typical Orwellian mentality, all animals are equal, some are more equal than others. This empowers the Big 6, enables them to steer towards where they're really going, which is to have a better relationship with Juve and Bayern and Barcelona and the European Club Association. It's Machiavellian. Johnny Walters came out on Twitter very strongly as well, talking about how it's all calculated to work for the Premier League powerhouses. 2 clubs run the Premier League behind the scenes. This proposal will give others a seat at that table, and he talked about the long list of demands they have, and the EFL will be ultimately having to give them over. So their motivation, I suppose, then becomes apparent. You've seen it, Simon Jordan's seen it, Johnny Walters isn't happy with it, plenty of others in the game aren't. The question then is, are the EFL or all those clubs, especially with COVID, desperate enough financially to just swallow it in return for that 25% and the 250 million? Is this thing going to happen?
I don't think so, but you can see why the clubs like Accrington Stanley, and I think, as you know, Joe, I'm a Leyton Orient fan. So, in my lifetime, Leyton Orient have been in either League One, League Two, or the National League. I can't remember them in what is now the Championship. So for those clubs, they're probably thinking, well, if we get a bit more extra money, great. That's wonderful. Yeah, no, we'll take that, because they're never realistically going to be in the Premier League anyway. So you could see how it could go through. But I agree with everything that's just been said there. I don't understand why they need to change the voting system for this to be packaged to be on offer to those clubs. There is no need to change the voting system unless there is something else at play and there's something else in it for the Big 6. There is absolutely, I cannot see how they can explain that to me. And I thought, quite frankly, Rick Parry saying it was insulting to hear him say yesterday, why should Huddersfield have as much of a say about what goes on in the Premier League as Manchester United? Well, Huddersfield don't currently have as much of a say about what goes on in the Premier League as Manchester United, because they're not in the Premier League. But they were in the Premier League. They earned that place at the table. And actually, when Huddersfield have a vote, they are voting for the clubs like themselves who might spend 1-2 seasons in the Premier League, and they give those clubs a voice. If the Big 6 control it, the only voice, the only regulations that will change, the only mechanism to make that change will be in their hands. There will be no checks and balance. And people say to me, oh, well, the FA have still got a golden share. I noticed that has leaked out today, that the FA will still have their golden share. If someone can tell me one thing that the FA have blocked the Premier League from doing since its inception, since its creation, wonderful. But I can't think of a single important thing that the FA has stepped in to stop the Premier League. It is about giving the Big Six what they want and control over the future of the Premier League, and it will serve their needs, their desires. And if you want to trust the Glaziers, for example, who have widely said to have been disastrous owners for Manchester United, who Manchester United supporters don't like, who saddled the club with millions and millions of pounds of debt and have taken millions of pounds out in share dividends, you want to give them a control over the whole of English football and think they're going to do it for the best interests of English football. You're crazy. And let's talk about Fenway and Liverpool, because in the last few months, we've seen these wonderful owners that are a lot of good for Liverpool Football Club. In the last few months, we've seen them furlough their staff, asking British taxpayers to pay those costs of those wages. They're billionaires, worth billions. The whole organisation is worth billions. And they had to reverse that decision within about 48 hours after public outcry. They're now, it turns out, since 2017, been working on this little plot behind the scenes with Manchester United to carve up English football and the top of English football, where the business end, where the trophies are won, etc., where European football is competed for, and carve it up and basically try and solidify their position in the top six. Because let's face it, it's not so long ago that Liverpool weren't finishing in the top six of the Premier League. Man U have had bad seasons where they finished outside of the top six of the Premier League. Leicester City won the Premier League not so long ago. Wolves have challenged the top six. Everton are I've got a realistic chance this season of breaking into the top four. The Big Six don't want that to happen, and they want to stack everything in their favour to make sure that they are the top six club season after season.
Luke Edwards of the Daily Telegraph. Thanks so much, Luke. Appreciate it.
No worries.